Bounding into Comics and Brett R. Smith present An Escape from the Future.
Welcome to Escape from the Future, brought to you by Bounding into Comics. I'm your host and comic veteran, Brett R. Smith, and joining me today is Christian Toto. Christian is an award-winning film critic, journalist, and founder of Hollywood in Toto. He's the author of Virtue Bombs, How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul, and hosts the Hollywood in Toto podcast on Radio American Network. You're also switching to YouTube, aren't you? Or are you going to start doing YouTube?
Yeah, I put out a couple of videos already sort of apart from my podcast, but I'm changing my podcast to a video podcast. So that's
cool.
Within days, I'm almost there. So I make that transition, and but you'll still be able to hear the show on traditional podcast networks like iTunes. So it'll still exist, but you'll be able to see me and my guests as well. So
cool. That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me. It's great to see you today.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about if we are witnessing the death of the American theater chain as we know it. You and I talked about what we think the future of the theater chains are many times. You've written about it. And yesterday I caught this post on X from Jeff Rousseau. I think I'm saying that right. And he's a physical media enthusiast. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got some great reviews, some good, some interesting takes. And this thread that he posted really kind of nicely lays out this roadmap where I think theater chains could be headed, some of which echoes what you and I have talked about. But let's read through this really quick. I'm going to share this and then we'll discuss. Okay, so The Fall Guy is already going to be available to watch at home tomorrow, May 21st. What is the incentive to go to the theater? It used to be exclusivity. It was the only place to see a movie for 3 months or more. That exclusive access sold tickets. Better tech could be an incentive, except it isn't anymore in most places. Now you can buy a 75-inch 4K TV under $700. That's amazing. Meanwhile, theaters all over the country have 2K projectors, dying lamps, poor calibration because projectionists are gone. Very true. Your TV at home is better. Some of them are. TVs are only getting bigger. TLC now has an 115-inch 4K TV coming this year. 75 to 85 inches is standard size. OLED, QLED, mini LED tech looks better than most theaters. Sound bars are cheaper. Surround systems are bringing theater experiences to the home. How do theaters win? For the ones that survive, they will survive on the experience factor, bringing 35 to 70 millimeter screenings for film fans, building in a restaurant bar experience for date nights like Drafthouse, screening older fan favorites on the big screen. That's a big one. Either way, the mass market movie theater is on its deathbed. The 2024 box office is on pace to come in almost 20% under 2023 numbers. I don't know what saves theater chains, but they better start offering something more, or I think most of them will be closed by 2030. Crazy, but this is stuff you and I have talked about in DMs. We've talked about it in other past videos. Point by point, I think he's right on the money as far as what theater chains have to compete with when it comes to your Alamo Drafthouses and home theaters. He's right. New TVs are becoming better than what you get with a theater chain, with the exception of IMAX, obviously. But most new high-end TVs do look better than your local theater chain, and they're getting cheaper. I would argue that the sound in the theater still has home theaters beat hands down, but even that's changing. What do you think?
I want to add one so I'm spoiled. I go to movie screenings, which means that they're before the movie comes out, and it's kind of a special audience. It's really hardcore movie fans and my fellow critics. So we're not snapping pictures. We're not doing all the hijinks that happens in theaters.
Yeah.
So, and I was exposed to it recently. It was rather shocking, but also I went to a regular theater recently and I watched a lot of commercials.
Yeah.
I don't mean trailers. I mean commercials.
Right.
And, when I was a teenager, they flirted with that and they pulled it back. I think people were angry about it, and rightly so. But, you can't charge the exorbitant fees they're charging now to get into a theater and then bombard you with commercials. The trailers, obviously, you love trailers. They're great. I think they show too many in general. But at least that's part of the experience. It's a tease. It's the best of what a movie is, even the flops. But the commercials, I'm just outraged by that. And I'm just shocked that we've accepted that. Just another thing that's going on with this whole experience. But I think I think theaters have bounced back more than I expected after the pandemic. It seemed really tragic and like
Mhm.
this is the end at that moment. But
Yeah.
we've seen, Barbie and Oppenheimer, even the recent Godzilla Kong movie has done pretty well.
Yep.
But yeah, it's hard to deny there are so many factors weighing against it. And if you see a new movie and even if it's doing moderately well, and some of them do, they're on, video on demand in just a
Right.
couple weeks. I mean,
Right.
and that's like $20,
Right.
which is almost the price of one ticket. And you can just have your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your neighbors, and then you're saving money at home. It's
Yeah.
they've got to figure out some ways to get better at this experience. And I think, of course, the Alamo shutting people up is critical, I would think, or even just having different theaters where, hey, if you want to talk and take pictures and have conversations, go to theater 2. In theater 1, it's whisper quiet. I mean, I think that might even be a good idea too.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the kids free resorts
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
kids free cruises type thing. It's like,
Mhm.
this is for serious moviegoers that don't want to have their experience destroyed because you have to check your email or you want
Yeah.
to take a
Yeah.
picture during the credit sequences to show what movie you're in. You know, um, I love the idea of bringing 30 to 75 millimeter movies for film fans and showing older film favorites on the big screen. Building a restaurant bar for date nights is also a
Mhm.
great idea. We already have these kinds of theaters which offer this kind of experience, but they are the smaller theater chains like Alamo Drafthouse and Roadhouse Cinemas, which is a
Mhm.
chain in Arizona, which I used to go to all the time. These are smaller, more boutique cinemas that offer something I describe as a first class
Mhm.
experience. Yes, it's more expensive. It's a more expensive experience altogether, but you get what you pay for in
Mhm.
comparison to the larger theater chains. And, if Alamo Drafthouse is first class, then the larger theater chains have become akin to riding the bus. That's
Mhm.
basically how I see it. You just never quite know what the hell is going to happen. You might have a decent experience or, you might get mugged. So, something else that you brought up is this death of movie theater etiquette, which is part of the ongoing death of standards in American culture. When you have other people in the theater using their smartphones, talking during the film, it ruins the experience for everyone. Too many
Mhm.
people act as if the movie theater is their own living room, and it's not. And then to make matters worse, these large theater chains, like you said, they won't boot you out if you're ruining other people's movie experience. Cinemark and others no longer remove people for
Mhm.
being a nuisance. So there's no enforcement against bad behavior, kind of like New York City, you know? So, however, the smaller boutique chains like Alamo Drafthouse will kick your ass out for being on your phone during the film. They even brag about it on social
That's right.
media. So there are real consequences for being a jerk at the smaller chains, which is part of what you pay for. You pay for that enforcement. Therefore, there's a guarantee that you're going to have a
Mhm.
great experience, right?
Yeah, and and if it's an important movie or an important night or an important date, I think many people would be a-okay with that experience. And by the way, I love your bus analogy, but buses are fairly inexpensive, and that's part of
Right.
their appeal. These movies are not inexpensive.
Yeah.
You're getting the bus experience for an Uber. What I don't know what the what's
Uber
the
X.
Uber,
Right.
yeah, Uber
Right.
Black or whatever they call
Right.
the.
Black. Yeah. Well,
So
yeah. Well, yeah.
there's a price comparison there. It doesn't work.
The ticket was always the lost leader, and then they would get you on popcorn, drinks, and
Yeah.
candy, right? So now I walk in and there's somebody to greet me and scan my phone or check me in. I get my ticket stub. Then I go and I get my popcorn from somebody. That's something that is still done for the
Mhm.
customer, but you have to go and pick your own peanuts and candy, and then you've got to go and fill your own soda. It's very much
Mhm.
like this self checkout, and it's like, okay, if I'm paying this exorbitant amount, which, like you said, it should be kind of like riding the bus at this point. That should be a
Mhm.
discount, but I'm paying the same amount, if not more, than what I used to for the same service. But it's not the same service, right? But you go to an Alamo Drafthouse, you go to a Roadhouse Cinema, all of that same old school cinema, customer service is still there. Plus, they'll enforce the rules, man. With an iron fist.
There was a local cinema house here in Denver. They did this a while ago. They stopped it a while ago as well. But before the movie began, an usher, an employee would come out
Mhm.
and tell like a little nugget about the movie, a little factoid, a little trivia. It was such a lovely experience, I have to say. And it didn't matter whether you knew that or not, or cared or not, but it made it feel a little bit special. And, that would be, I mean, it seems, how much would that cost to make that happen? I don't know.
Yeah.
But, we touched on this before, and I want to bring it up again, is the bringing back old movies to the theaters. Now, of course, all the money has been spent. So you think it's just a matter of marketing anew, and you're kind of get a new revenue stream, much smaller than in the past. But I really think that brings generations together, and it kind of rekindles memories of your youth, of going to the movie and seeing that particular film, and I feel like that's what they need to really work on, is the culture of movie going, and the fact that it is different to watch a movie, a comedy in a crowd of everyone's laughing, or a horror movie where everyone's kind of sucking in their breath because they're afraid. I mean, that is the ultimate advantage that these theaters have, is that you can't do that at home. You can have the greatest movie theater with the greatest sound at home and the cushiest couch, but you can't have 50 people in your living room to watch it with you and to experience that. And I don't know how you build upon that, but I think these older movies coming back, really, it feels like a special thing. And I think that we're so nostalgia driven these days that could be something that's consequential, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that the Phantom Menace made, I think, 8 million in its opening
I
weekend
know.
a few weeks ago, and no one
Yeah.
liked the movie. So,
it was in the #2 spot, after 30 or 25 years. I'm getting my math screwed up, but Fathom Events is doing a lot of these, 35-year anniversary of Dune, or 35, 40-year anniversary of Die Hard. We go to see those. We go to see the old ones, which they bring back. The nice thing about the Fathom Events is that they're a little bit more expensive from the standpoint of ticket price, but you get no commercials and no previews. You just go straight into the movie.
Yeah.
I don't mind previews, because in the 80s and the 90s, the previews were fun because it only took about maybe 10 or 15 minutes. They really wouldn't make it any longer than that, because you're there to watch the show. But it used to be something like, we're running 10 or 15 minutes late, we'll be okay, because that's just the previews. Now it's like 30 minutes. You're sitting there for 20 to 25, maybe 30 minutes from the standpoint of the previews and all these crazy commercials, which I don't want to see. I don't want to see them. That's not why I go there.
And it's funny, because back in the day, that the trailers you saw in the theater, that might be the only time you actually see those trailers.
That's right.
You can go online and watch them. And there was a cable channel that had a half hour of just trailers. And as a movie guy, like I couldn't wait to watch that show. That was like the best show of the week. So
trailers were more important back then in a lot of ways, because, and really the only way, it's like you said, that you could see the trailers was to go to the movies and see them. Don't you remember when they were releasing trailers, like big movie trailers with big budget movies? They were doing that maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, where it's like, if you went to go see this movie, you're going to see the next trailer for this. That was another. Trailers were fun. That was kind of part of the whole experience. And now
we had digital back then. It wasn't so long ago, but if you make it exclusive, like the only way to see Avatar 3 is to go to the theater for this movie, they're going to give you a sneak peek. That might be interesting as well.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think one of the things we've lost is that communal experience of being in the theater with other people and hearing the gasps, the laughs, the tension. That's something that you get with sports. I mean, it's one of those experiences that you only get maybe with the theater. If you're a Broadway fan, you get that kind of interaction. So I was just, something else I was thinking about was the outside issues that the theater chains have to deal with. So the movies, which the large studios are putting out, are largely all reboots and sequels. Even Bob Iger recently said that Disney is going to focus solely on reboots, sequels, and already existing IP, because it's just easier to market, right? So many films the studios put out in the theater, they're not great. That drives people away. Hollywood doesn't do nearly the amount of volume of movies like they did in the 80s and 90s. And the movies they do release in the theater, they're not there very long, which is what we mentioned. You're lucky to have a 30-day run, it seems like, unless it's Dune, Barbie, or Oppenheimer, some of these really big budget blockbusters. But outside of those kinds of movies, they just have too short a run in the theater. That doesn't help any of the theaters. And like we were talking about, they go so fast to video on demand, which in turn makes theaters theater sales suffer. And it feeds into this streamer behavior of watching it on your own time when you want on whatever device, right? So I just think all of this is kind of a recipe for disaster. And it's almost like the studios can't figure out what they want to be. Do they want to be a streaming kind of platform or entity, or do they want to be something where you go to the theater? And it seems like they want to have their cake and eat it too, and they're spreading everything way too thin, and therefore these theater chains are suffering because of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the actors and the creators themselves are doing that, have your cake and eat it too. I mean, how many big name actors have made original Netflix movies? How many big name directors like Scorsese and Fincher are almost often exclusively working for these digital platforms? I mean, they should be on the front lines fighting this good fight, assuming it is a good fight.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to be too worried about that. They just want to get their movies out, their stories told, and get those checks cleared.
I know.
So, they're not helping. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody told me that in the beginning of The Fall Guy, that Ryan Reynolds and the director, thank you for coming to the movies, similar to what Tom Cruise did in the first 5 minutes of Top Gun Maverick, which is, hey, we tried to put together an incredible experience for you. Thank you for being here. We love and appreciate your support and for coming to the theater to have this immersive experience, which is the best way to experience this kind of movie. And it's interesting that, because we all said at the time when Tom was doing that, gosh, we wish that more Hollywood stars would do this. And now you've got Gosling and this director doing the same thing. There's not a whole lot of appreciation for it, but I think it's largely because the people that remember The Fall Guy, guys like you and I, don't really see much of the Lee Majors TV show in the movie.
No.
And I think that's a problem. I don't understand why they wouldn't do that, because there's a really cool base there, which still applies to today. But, if you're going to build on nostalgia alone and work with existing IPs, why not ground them and retain that core base that's been there since the beginning? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, with The Fall Guy, I wasn't really familiar with the old show. I knew of it. I mean, that was my era. But they just wanted the name. They just wanted the name. They thought that would be enough, and it clearly wasn't. And then there's at the end of the movie, you see a couple of the old guard coming back, a big surprise, which is fine. It was a sweet moment.
Sure.
But they seem to want to use the IP but not respect the IP often. I mean, I think maybe the debacle over the Snow White live action may be the best example of that, where they just, my gosh, even the actors can't even sing the source material's praises. But listen, and I say this a lot. I think it should be said. A lot of that is our fault. I mean, listen, if they put out original movies like The Creator and If and things like that, and they go blockbuster status right away because we're so starved for new stories, then Hollywood would make new stories. But if they do, and there's a mediocre response, then you're going to get Moana 2, 3, and 4. That's partly our fault.
Yeah. Something I wanted to ask you. I'm not sure that I agree that the theater chains will be out of business by 2030, but I can see a future where they're pretty much gone, or they have adapted to the boutique theaters like Alamo and Roadhouse. I have noticed that Harkins is starting to do restaurant style type stuff in some of their theaters. Seems to be more high end. But do you think that Regal or Cinemark or even Harkins, do you think that they can adapt to compete with Alamo and Roadhouse cinemas and these first class experience theater chains?
I mean, they may have to. There may be no choice. 20 years ago, your average theater seat was pretty, I don't want to say it was uncomfortable, but it was pretty standard issue. And almost every theater I go to, it's a reclines, I could heat up. I mean, there's a table in front of me. So, I mean, I think they've upgraded even for a basic theater experience. But I mean, I think you really have to get innovative and figure out what would make this experience more enjoyable. What could you tweak to make it better? I mean, the obvious stuff is less speaking, less talking, less texting. I think food is a good alternative as well, as long as the prices aren't insane. But what else can you do? And I think, at least Alamo takes a good few swings. I mean, before the movie, I haven't been to Alamo in a little while, but they would show quirky shorts. If I was seeing a Jack Black movie, I would see Jack Black on a Japanese game show. I mean, shake it, be creative. Make it something that, that's different. I didn't expect that. I should go to Alamo because they're doing this, this, and this. And oh, by the way, I'll have a salted caramel shake while I'm here because I
Right.
looks great. I
Yeah.
mean, I just think that in the American marketplace now, you really have to be creative. And I mean, you and I are independent creators. We've got to leverage what we do. We just can't phone it in anymore.
Yeah.
We've got to really kind of bring our A game. And I think that applies across the board. If you're in the theater business, what could you do to make it better? Talk to your audience, innovate, try things out.
Mhm.
See what happens, roll the dice, try in a couple of theaters. If it's working, go wide. I mean, that's what they do with indie films. I mean, like I remember the movie Once came out
Mhm.
and it was such a beautiful film. And that was a movie that stuck in theaters forever. It just wouldn't go away because people loved it. But I'm sure it didn't start out in 4,000 screens.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was a pretty modest rollout, but the word of mouth kicked in. Why not implement some new strategies, some new thinking, make it,
Mhm.
is there a way to kind of weaponize your smartphone to make it I don't know. I mean, just
Yeah.
you got to make something different and new and fresh and exciting and try.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the future is smaller boutique theaters like
Mhm.
Alamo and Roadhouse. And I think there'll be more of those kind of chains springing up.
Mhm.
And I think they'll show new movies, independent films, fan favorites.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're going to have to get creative. I think they could have events with, Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, and I think Randy Quaid were touring
Yeah.
when National Lampoon's Vacation was re-released for its 35th anniversary. So they'd
Yeah.
hit certain theaters. That's something that an Alamo could bring in as actual. Have Chevy Chase there at the
Yeah.
theater talking to you before the show and after, and cater to those who grew up loving going to those kind of movies.
Mhm.
It's going to be more expensive, but it'll attract, I think, the kind of customer who wants that excellent experience with great food and drinks and atmosphere, and also one that draws a certain type of clientele who respects and practices proper theater etiquette.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get thrown out. So I mean, I think that premium experience is going to come with a premium price tag, but it's
We,
going to weed out people who might be on their phones or be disruptive.
you mentioned the price. I mean, I'm shocked that, I mean, if you try to go to a concert recently, the prices are off the charts,
It's insane.
or a sports event. But listen, you turn on the TV and the seats are full. So people have the money at this moment, unless things keep going south here,
Yeah.
to pay for it. My son went to a party a few weeks back. It was like they wanted to go see Wonka in a local theater. And that theater had a playroom for the kids, like a place where you can, maybe the parents could bring a pizza or just have the kids all get together
There you go.
and hang around and have fun. And then they go to the movie. And I thought, I hadn't seen that in the past. So that's just like a little wrinkle that might be interesting. I love your idea about the actors coming to town. John Cusack is it's quite the character on social media. I'll just put it that way. But he's been touring with some of his classic films where he'll screen it, have a Q&A afterwards. And, I mean, I think that kind of one-on-one connection is interesting as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do. I'd also love to have a theater where they have pretty small theater rooms that you could rent out at a fairly reasonable price. I'd love
Yep.
to have like maybe 10 buddies chip in and see Raiders of the Lost Ark again when I want to see it and when my
Yeah.
friends want to see it. Like maybe that's another thing too.
Yeah, we've got a local theater, which is a historic theater that they've redone. We got new seats, new projection, new sound, and you can rent it out for the
Yeah.
whole day, and you can watch whatever you want. And Lisa bought it for me for my birthday last year,
Uh-huh.
and I had just gotten the Blu-ray of Superman the movie, which was the very first movie I ever saw. But I was like 2 years old. My mom took me to go see this in 1978, and I actually sat through the movie with proper theater etiquette. I didn't cry. I didn't go crazy. I didn't want to, jump around and climb over the seats. I just sat there and watched. And my folks took me to a lot of movies when I was a little kid because I was a good viewer. I wouldn't pitch a fit, like most probably kids would. I was just enthralled as to what was going on the screen. But it was really special to have the entire theater to yourself. It was just the two of us. And we watched the movie, and it was fantastic. And it was great seeing that movie, which I had only experienced on TV through home video and DVD on the big screen for the first time. And to hear that big Johnny Williams soundtrack blasting, I mean, again, it's that whole immersive experience that you really only get at the theater. I mean, I've got a killer plasma screen. I've got a really good Bose sound bar. Technology is getting to the point where you really can have an immersive experience at home. However, there's just something about going to the movies. And sometimes I think that this is going to become kind of a generational thing, because the streamers, there's a whole generation out there that is a streaming generation, and they don't understand this concept of being in this one particular place at this one particular time to watch something. They want to watch it when they want to watch it on their own device, on their own time. So I don't really know how you bridge that, especially if there's no interest. But I keep thinking that the theater experience is going to become something akin to vinyl for guys like you and me, our generation, who grew up with that experience, still love it, still want to experience it. And then there's new generation, a younger generation, who finds vinyl, who finds all of the same attractions about vinyl and about the experience and the aesthetic. And it's going to become kind of this, the theater experience, I think, will become sort of like a movie, generational, and also a movie lovers or collectors, a collector enthusiast experience.
One of the other problems I have with the culture right now is, I don't think this is political, but I see very few new movies that I can't wait to watch again and again.
I hear you.
And that used to be my kind of just standard issue where, I mean, listen, I've seen Alien 20 times, and I almost went to the theater a few weeks ago when they put it in theaters. Yeah. That's how much I love that movie and how much I wanted to experience it again. But I just feel like, I want movies that I want to watch again and see, appreciate it on a different level. I mean, when you watch a movie 3 times, you'll pick up new things. And I just feel like the content lately has just been such a buzzkill. And
it's lousy.
The movies that I find enjoyable, I'm one and done. I'm fine. I don't need to see it again. So.
Those movies that we rewatch over and over again, like Caddyshack or like Blade Runner, we all cultivate these lines, the one-liners. Die Hard. How many times have I seen Die Hard? I mean, dozens and dozens of times. I saw it in the theater on opening night in 1988 or 89. I hadn't seen it in the theater since, obviously, but when it came out for Fathom Events, we were there, and we were there with maybe like 4 or 5 other people. It was not a packed house, but how many one-liners are in that movie, right? Yeah. Caddyshack, it's an endless stream of one-liners, but these are iconic movies, and that's why we quote them. And there's not a lot of modern movies that I am quoting or that I am going back and rewatching again. I feel you, man. I mean, there's very few out there where I'm like, you know what, I want to watch that again. Top Gun Maverick is one which I saw in the theater twice, and haven't done that in a long time. Again, going and seeing it twice. That was something that we did a lot back then, maybe 3 times. Right.
And that was a movie that lingered all summer long. They couldn't get it out of the theaters. It just kept performing. It kept hanging in there.
Yeah, exactly. So many of these big blockbusters, these iconic movies from the 80s and 90s, they were in the theater for months and months. Star Wars, the original Star Wars, ran for like a year. Because my dad took me to that, but it was back in the theater. They brought it back before I think right before Empire came out. They brought it back into the theater for a limited run. So probably early 80s. But yeah, it's the entertainment that the studios are putting out, the large ones, are not helping the theaters from that standpoint of making these movies that we want to go back and see again, and again, we're, instead of saying, well, I've seen it, and I'll wait a couple weeks or a couple months for it to come on video on demand, and then I'll either buy the Blu-ray or I'll buy the digital copy and I'll watch it again. Yeah, it's an indictment on the quality of what they're putting out, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's just retreads, it's reboots, it's sequels. It's just kind of there's no real creativity. You're talking about being creative. It's like, where are the creatives in Hollywood? Make something new. Do something new. You know what I mean? Yeah. So,
well, if they do, they might get trigger warnings. So,
I can't believe that with Goodfellas, man. I just blew my mind. I don't know if you saw that recently, but Goodfellas.
Yeah, it's why I mentioned it. I really want, literally, Martin Scorsese. I want him to come out and comment on it. I want someone big, not just I mean, you and I will cry out, and we should cry out, and there, we have some voice, some platforms, but I want the biggies to do it too. I mean, I want the De Niros of the world to, Robert De Niro was on every different talk show blasting Trump, and God bless him, he can do what he wants, but maybe spare a syllable about this,
I
because
know.
this does matter.
All we get is Judi Dench. Judi Dench is our culture warrior. She's the one who's speaking up and saying, if you don't like, if you need trigger warnings, then stay out of the theater.
Yeah,
Don't go to the movies. Just F off. Basically, that's what she was essentially saying in a nicer way, her English way.
Doesn't Martin Scorsese hear this? It doesn't, like, isn't he at a reception, or maybe working on his next film project, and said, "Hey, Marty, did you hear what they did to your movie?" I mean, he must know.
Where are the Bond directors? Where's John Glenn? Where are some of these guys that I know they're still alive, that they're putting trigger warnings on Bond films as well?
Or Daniel Craig, or Pierce Brosnan, or
yeah, they're just silent. They're just silent, and I don't understand it. The older actors, I would think, would who have less to lose, could come out and say something. Certainly, Marty Scorsese has nothing to lose by coming out and saying something. I mean, he'll go and trash talk Marvel movies, but he won't come out and defend his own movie from a bunch of moral busybodies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is this, like the PMRC? I keep thinking that Tipper Gore is going to be discovered being behind these trigger warnings, because
pulling the strings, right?
Yeah. It's just so crazy, man. And I just think to myself, we're such a wussified nation, a wussified culture, and this is part of it. I mean,
we shouldn't need a Dame Judi Dench to be the on the battle lines. She should be one of 1,000 voices.
If that's not an incomplete indictment of the current state of masculinity among Hollywood directors, I don't know what is that you got Judi Dench, the only one standing up and saying anything. It's pathetic. But, I mean, Hollywood, it is what it is, man. And it's just kind of, at this point, I just see it as sort of like corporate entertainment. It's very much, remember when Breitbart launched originally back in 03 or 05 or whatever it was, it had big government, it had its different verticals, and one of them was big Hollywood. And that was John Nolte and a bunch of other guys. But that's kind of what I think of it as. It's like big oil, big pharma. This is big entertainment. That's what it is now. And it's largely because these corporations have completely and totally homogenized everything. They've made everything acceptable, and therefore it's completely and totally bland. It has no character. It has no moxie. Doesn't have any mojo. It's just this flavorless, brand of gum that you're supposed to chew on for 2.5 hours, and you're supposed to like it.
Well, listen, you do something that's edgy, and social media lights up, but mostly who cares, because it's going to light up on the next subject in about 2 days.
Yeah.
So just grin and bear it and say, hey, I love the fact that people are having a conversation about the work I did.
Yeah.
I'm glad people are talking about it. I welcome debate. I hope you enjoy it. I worked hard on it. And if you disagree, let's have that conversation.
Yeah. I still think that some of the smaller studios, I did see Ferrari. I saw Michael Mann's Ferrari. I liked it. I thought it was well done. I thought it had some issues, but I liked it a lot. It's a $90 million independent film from A24. No, Neon. I'm sorry, Neon. But I think A24 and Neon, I think that they're going to start giving Hollywood a run for their money. We got Ridley Scott, like you were talking about, working with Apple Films. That's what he did Napoleon through. All these guys that have their deals with Netflix, Guy Ritchie, and on and on. I think that's where the competition is going to come from. They're going to be smaller films, probably smaller budgets, but ultimately that's a good thing, because if we can bring these budgets down, we'll get more volume. We'll get more movies made, and maybe they'll start to do some new things. But I don't think that anything new is going to come out of the big studios. I just think they have this corporate mentality, this corporate culture. Plus, they're the ones hiring all these DEI hires. All these DEI graduates, bringing them in, and they're causing all kinds of problems. So where's the creativity going to flow to for artists who want their voice? And that's going to be the smaller studios, or the smaller, not studios, but production houses. It's like something, a Land of Bad. Can you imagine in the 80s or the 90s, Land of Bad would have been put out by 20th Century Fox or Paramount or a big studio. They would have gotten distribution through a big studio. But it's this small film. It was playing on maybe, 50 screens in all of Texas for a very short window. We missed it, but it's an incredible movie.
It's so good.
It's so
I'm
good.
still shocked at it. It's so good. Yeah, I think the name maybe it's kind of a clunky name. I don't think the name works, but
Probably not.
maybe it's a marketing thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of my preferred. I don't know if it's my favorite movie of the year, but it's certainly one I'd watch again.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. It's like there's good and bad in this. It's definitely a yin and a yang, and I
Mm.
think that the market is going to shake out the bad and prop up the good. And I
Yeah.
think that the theater chains are gonna. The interesting thing about the theater chains I read recently is that they have clauses in their leases which they can basically renegotiate rent when they're in bad times because it's a lot of infrastructure. It's a lot of cost to go in and build a theater. So it's
Mm.
usually an anchor to a mall or an outside mall. It's like an anchor store.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like they want to keep them there. It's a big investment. They want to hold that investment and see a profit. So they'll probably hang around and linger around for a while. But at the same time, like you said, if they don't get creative and start doing things and competing with these smaller theater
Mm.
chains like Alamo and Roadhouse, I don't see how they survive. But
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be quite as quick as Jeff predicts that it's going to be by 2030. They're all going to be gone, but who knows?
Who knows? I think culture is moving much more quickly than it ever has in my lifetime, and so that's I don't put anything past the culture
Yeah,
to move in a severe direction. So we'll see.
yeah, that's a good point.
Hmm.
Well, sadly, we're out of time. Christian, what's the best way our viewers can support you?
Well, I oversee the Hollywood in Toto podcast, comes out weekly. It's shifting to video format very, very soon. But also you can go to my website, hollywoodintoto.com. And what I've been trying to do is really cover the stories that are not being covered. Great documentaries that have a very powerful perspective that just don't get coverage, don't get press, don't get attention. The critics ignore them too, like Screams Before Silence. That's a great example. So just trying to zig where others are zagging, and because the zigging is important. These
It
stories
is.
do matter. They do impact the culture. They do enlighten us, and we should get more eyeballs on them.
Yeah, I love Hollywood and Toto. So I go there daily, and I encourage everyone else to check it out. We'll link to everything so they can check you out. What's the best way our viewers can find you and stay up to date on everything you have going on?
I'm really active, maybe too active on Twitter, or X as it's now officially called. So I am at Hollywood in Toto, TOTO. And, I'll link to my stories and my podcasts and my alleged wit. So that's a good place to check me out.
It's not alleged, it's real. We'll link to that too. All
Sounds
right.
good.
For more videos like this one, subscribe to Bounding in the Comics channel on YouTube. Also make sure and like this video and leave us a comment. Let us know if you've gone to Alamo Drafthouse or Roadhouse Cinemas and what you think of it in comparison to the big theater chains. I'd love to know. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.